Hey everybody, how you doing? And welcome to another episode of the John Riley Project. Hey, this is a podcast all about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So thanks for joining me here. We're going to break down a number of big news stories here in the world, in our local area, and including in my hometown of Poway. So let me tee up for you our agenda for today. The first thing we're going to talk about is Argentina. And is Trump bailing out Argentina? I mean, what the hell is going on in Argentina? So we're going to kind of give you a little bit of a breakdown of that. Then we're going to talk a little bit about, housing in San Diego, which has been a frequent topic on the podcast. People are putting in ADUs, these granny flats or, maybe small apartment complexes in people's backyards, and people's hair are on fire as a result of that. We're going to share an example of that story. Here in my hometown of Poway, huge news. Tony Blain, a sitting city council member, has been indicted by the San Diego DA, for a whole litany of reasons. And this is linked to the recall effort that is going on right now, which people are voting on with mail-in ballots right now, right up until voting day next week. So that's an active topic here in Poway. It's a big news here locally. I'm going to share with you a little bit about my own ballot. I brought it with me. And so we're going to break it down on what I'm voting for and why and what and how and all that. We'll break that down. And then finally, I want to share with you kind of lessons in the world of pursuing happiness and kind of looking at moral frameworks and kind of how I view the world. Is it good versus evil? Or are there more nuances to that? Is there like win-win versus win-lose versus lose-win versus lose-lose? And I'm going to break down this win-win matrix and kind of how it shapes my own perspective of society, of politics, and frankly, of morality. And so we'll get into that. So how you doing, everybody? Glad you could join us. This is episode number 346. We're recording today. Normally we live stream, so hope you're able to catch the recording, catch the video clips that we'll be posting. But let's jump in and let's talk about Argentina. And oh my God, you heard the news earlier this month. It was announced that Trump was giving Argentina $20 billion. And then we found out it wasn't just 20, it's 40 billion. And what the hell? Why is Trump bailing out Argentina? Then we find out, because of this trade war with China, our soybean farmers can't export any soybeans, although supposedly Trump has fixed that in his meetings with Xi just recently. But who's picked up the slack are Argentinian soybean farmers, and they're the ones that are selling all the soybeans into China, which is further screwing over our farmers, and people are angry. And at the same time, while $40 billion is being shipped out to Argentina, we've got SNAP benefits, food stamps are going to be cut because of the government shutdown. We've got this whole business about apparently health insurance rates are about to skyrocket because they're not, because of the government shutdown and everything that's going on. And now suddenly a lot of my friends on the left are turning into America first. They're saying, hey, we need to prioritize America, not Argentina. What the hell are you doing with Argentina? And meanwhile, my friends on the left don't really like Javier Milei, who is the president of Argentina, who is sort of Trump-ish in some ways, certainly when it comes to his hair and kind of his bombastic presentation on stage. But their political philosophy and agendas are extraordinarily different, near opposites. And I'm going to break down a little bit of that as we go into this. But meanwhile, my friends on the right, they're not necessarily supportive of this because, my friends on the right claim to be for America first, but they know that there's this crazy guy down in Argentina and they're probably cheering him on, and they just sort of shrug it off like 40 billion Argentina, whatever, all they care about are like deporting the illegals and, a number of other kind of the MAGA agenda. So I want to just share my own thoughts and opinions on this Argentinian story because Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, is a libertarian. He's from the Austrian School of Economics. He's a Mises guy. In many ways, he's aligned for a lot of policies on how I shape and see the world. And for me, this guy is a breath of fresh air. It's like, oh my God, we finally have a guy that's like, he's a legitimate, he's an economist. So he's bringing sound economic theory to solving a terrible economic crisis in Argentina. And people are saying, well, wait a minute, this is a bailout. But it's not really a bailout. It's different than a bailout. Now, if Argentina was running this insane budget deficit like we do in America, and they needed us to throw some cash their way to bail out the government budget, then you could say, okay, that's a bailout. Okay. But this is a little different. What they're doing is they're providing cash for a currency swap to prop up the economy. Now, there's some interesting background into this, but before I explain why they're doing the currency swap, let me explain to you what's been going on in Argentina. Going backwards like 100 years, Argentina was one of the richest richest countries in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, certainly US won, but Argentina was pretty close number 2 100 years ago. But over time, they have lost a great deal of wealth, of pride in Argentina. We've seen inflation to like crazy, unfathomable amounts of inflation, like over 200% a year, which is just mind-blowing. We're seeing all kinds of just really terrible conditions in Argentina because of Peronist policies. You know, don't cry for me, Argentina, Peron. And that regime, you know, which, you know, eventually went on to, I guess, the wife, et cetera. Those policies have destroyed Argentina. And that's why they are in such dire circumstances economically. And frankly, those dire circumstances is what's sort of opened the door for a political outsider like Milei to get in. Not only a political outsider, but a guy that had answers to these questions and was basically calling out the Peronists and a lot of the left-wing folks for their disaster policies. But Argentina has made massive progress. I think it's important to understand that. You know, in October of 2024, Argentina had a 20% per month inflation rate. I mean, so that's like, you know, if you extrapolate that, that would be well over, that'd be 240% a year if it was consistent for 12 months, right? I mean, we're complaining when, you know, inflation rates get up to 7 or 8%. You know, during the peak COVID for a while, it got just like a little bit above 10%. And we were going crazy here in America. Imagine if the problem over there, it's like, I mean, it's incredible. It's like 30, 40, 50 times worse than in America. But he has brought in 1 year, inflation in October of 2024 was 20%. In October of 2025, it was 2% in 1 month, which projects out to 24% per year, which still ain't good. You know, on an annualized basis, you know, I know the Federal Reserve here in America would like inflation to be around 2%, you know, which they say kind of matches sort of population growth and, you know, being the normal growth rate for an economy, and inflation should sort of match that, you know, to optimize economic output and optimize employment. I don't know. Is 2% the right number? I know central planners, I often don't get it right. But the point is that Argentina's inflation rate has fallen off a cliff, and it still needs to fall further, but he's made great progress because of Milei's policies. He's deregulated the economy. You know, he's eliminated import licenses. You know, he's made it easier for companies to import products into Argentina. What are we doing in America? We're doing the opposite. We're making it harder to import goods into America, and certainly more expensive with tariffs. And he's lifting price controls. He even removed a lot of rent control and other rent regulations in Buenos Aires and saw a radical decline in the cost of housing, especially for renters. I mean, because what he did is, since he deregulated the housing market, that in effect made a lot of housing units that previously were ineligible to be rented now suddenly could be rented, or rented in new and innovative ways, you know, to transform a single family home into a 4-unit apartment building or whatever it is. You know, providing a lot more of that supply of housing on the market radically decreased rent. So another big plus. Big feather in the cap of Argentina. They've attracted foreign investment there, increasing economic activity. They've reduced poverty as well. Now, it used to be a shocking, oh my God, 52.9% of the population in Argentina prior to Javier Milei becoming president, 52.9% were in poverty. Now it's only 40%, but that's still positive progress. That means more and more people are being lifted out of poverty. Now, granted, they're going through a transformation, because they're trying to control inflation. It's kind of wreaking havoc in the job market. It's like one step back to take two steps forward. But they're already seeing a lot of the positive results of this. But it's a rocky transition, as any sort of a climb out tends to be. But I think it's important to understand that. Now, what was the money for? The initial $20 billion, as I understand it, was a currency swap, which meant that, I don't know if it was the United States government or the International Monetary Fund. I think it might have been the IMF. Took $20 billion and gave it to Argentina because the value of the Argentina peso had been falling. And the reason it had been falling is because investors in Argentina began to lose confidence in Javier Milei, because in a small district that was meant to be a canary in the coal mine for the Argentinian elections that just occurred last week, that they thought it was a signal that the people had found disfavor with Milei. And they thought that the economy in Argentina, as a result, because they were going to abandon Milei, were going to have more trouble, and they started pulling out. And so what Trump did, I think, in association with the IMF, is provided $20 billion in cash. They essentially provided dollars in exchange for pesos, which in Argentina, dollars are in high demand, pesos in lower demand. So they are bringing up the value of the peso, and as a result, they're providing sort of a presentation or evidence of value creation in Argentina while they're going through this crisis, in order to keep investors connected, because they have been spooked by the Peronists. Okay. And then it turned into another $20 billion, this time apparently from private funds, that's my understanding, not necessarily from taxpayer dollars, but from other investors. But ultimately, I think you have to understand that from Trump's point of view, this is more about taking care of American investors who had money kind of, in that Argentinian economy. And if Javier Milei lost, they were likely going to lose their butt. So he was trying to prop up Milei, but with the ultimate end goal of propping up his friends and his those he's connected to that have large investments in Argentina. And sure, there's a geopolitical strategy here going on, because you can see Trump sort of pivoting towards a Latin American or maybe a Western Hemisphere strategy for America, which that's a topic for a whole another podcast, because we have been, kind of at odds with Russia and China. Now, it seems that Trump's position on those two countries, obviously on Russia, is very different. On China, we're starting to see what's happening. But I'm wondering if he's going to take his focus off of those two foes and then shift his focus to the whole Western Hemisphere. We'll see about that. But at any rate, that's part of the strategy here with Trump. I mean, he's trying to satisfy investor friends. He's trying to, pursue a geopolitical strategy. But our left-wing friends, by the way, are just freaking out because of what's happening with SNAP and what's happening with the Affordable Care Act. Now, I'll just say this. There is, I'll say this is a message to my left-wing friends who are just mortified that SNAP is about to be defunded, that healthcare insurance premiums are about to significantly increase. I don't know. I've heard double, triple. I've heard all kinds of Armageddon numbers on this. Yeah, I mean, that's true. That's probably what's going to happen if they don't resolve the shutdown. And those idiots in Congress need to get together and resolve the shutdown. And by the way, the Republicans have the majority in both houses. And so really, they have the power. They can resolve this thing. But at the same time, the Democrats claim that they want to, cooperate and compromise. But then here they're not compromising. It's just a bunch of childish games. But if they get this thing together, the federal budget spending is $7 trillion a year. There's plenty of money for SNAP. There's plenty of money to subsidize healthcare premiums if that's the policy you want to pursue. It's just that they're spending it on other things that they deem a higher priority. So, and they also like to save these things as sort of political footballs that they can banty about and get everyone else into a tizzy. So I guess my summary statement of here is that the quote bailout of Argentina Okay, number one, it wasn't a bailout of, the budget. You could say, was it a bailout for investors? Yeah, probably that's what it was. Is there a geopolitical strategy behind this? Yeah. Do I support it? No. I like Javier Milei, but I'm not a fan, certainly not a fan of taxpayer dollars going over for foreign aid, especially to prop up a currency. As much as I like Javier Milei to succeed, I wouldn't approve of taxpayer dollars going. But if it's IMF dollars or private money going, I don't necessarily have a problem with that unless someone can present evidence to me that says that would be damaging. But I think there's a lot of misinformation about what's really happening in Argentina. The summary statement is A, yeah, there's $40 billion going. B, it's there to basically protect investors, essentially, American investors in many cases. And number three, Argentina is doing extraordinarily well compared to where they were a year ago. They're making great progress. And if this trajectory continues, it could turn into a really big success story. And not only a success story overall, but really a model of the benefit of free market economics and how it can make not only the rich richer, but it can bring the poor out of poverty. And so we're going to see a lot more from this as we go. Okay, enough of Argentina. Crazy. That's a crazy story. Okay. Now, here's what I'm going to do, and we're going to jump into some San Diego news. Just I want to make a quick plug. I do another podcast. I co-host a podcast, a sports podcast with Lee Hacksaw Hamilton. Now, I don't know, you may not have heard of Lee Hacksaw Hamilton. He's not Cookie Chainsaw Randolph. He's Lee Hacksaw Hamilton. He's the former play-by-play guy of the San Diego Chargers, of the Seattle Seahawks. He's broadcast professional baseball, professional hockey, professional soccer. I mean, this guy has been around the block in the world of sports. He's really broken through and built a sports talk empire on the West Coast back in the 1990s. Well, he and I co-host a sports podcast, and it's a ton of fun. So if you follow Major League Baseball on the World Series, if you follow football, college, NFL, basketball's getting started, so is hockey. We talk soccer, auto racing, a lot of great stuff on that podcast. So if you want to check it out, look up Lee Hacksaw Hamilton on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts and get some of that content. I'm kind of his wingman. I'm like the Ed McMahon for Lee Hacksaw Hamilton. So hope you can join us sometime. All right, let's keep on trucking. And I want to talk here about this. I'm hoping this doesn't turn into a clunky thing. I want to talk about San Diego homeowners fighting ADUs. And, this is a story I've reported on numerous times here on the podcast. And so what's happening is all across San Diego, we have a housing crisis. There's not enough housing units. And homeowners are realizing that there's great profitability in putting a granny flat, or some kind of a small housing unit in their backyard. And now they can suddenly monetize their property because property values are so high and it's hard to find a place to rent. And, it solves the problem for housing. But what's happening is the housing crisis is so bad that now people are building 2-story, 3-story kind of ADUs in people's backyards. And it's like suddenly transforming neighborhoods and blocking people's views. And I saw this video that was on Facebook that was really an excerpt from CBS 8. And I am going to try to bring it up here on my screen. I'm going to see if I can pull this off. If I can, this will be a big victory for me. And we're going to share this screen. And we'll put it up here. And you see it? There it is. All right, I'm going to play this video for you. Check this out and tell me what.
I mean, this is ridiculous what's going on here and what they're doing in other neighborhoods. And it has to stop. Who wants to live next to this? And I mean, God forbid if I even get any money for my house.
Kevin Moorfield's family has owned his home on Shoshone Avenue since the 1950s. But now he's considering moving after this ADU development popped up next door.
This is horrible. We wanted to live here.
The development also isn't required to provide any additional parking, creating another headache for neighbors. His cul-de-sac also resides near a canyon, raising safety concerns.
So if a fire comes right here, my fence, that tree, my whole house is on fire.
If you don't understand this trick, you will be easy to manipulate. It's been used by the
Okay. I don't know if I got some of that extra audio in there. If I did, I'm sorry. All right. What did you think of that? I mean, to me, that was an interesting video because here's a guy that lives on a cul-de-sac. And I don't know what part of San Diego this is. Is it like in La Mesa or is it in the city of San Diego? And on the other end of on the other side of his backyard, someone's putting these 2-story ADUs that are just towering over his backyard fence. And he's great. He's angry about it. He goes, "What's going on? It's been like this nice neighborhood for 50 years, and we never had a problem. And now suddenly, look at this. I'm now at a disadvantage." He goes, "I can't even sell my house. Probably no one to give me any money for it." And I'm like, oh. So I just wanted to say that this is interesting to me because this is a common reaction or a common line of complaints with the whole housing crisis, ADU, granny flat situation. Number one, it's important to understand that we are in a housing crisis. And what that means is there's not enough supply and there's still massive demand. And when you have that, you suddenly have distortions in the market, especially if government makes it illegal to build more housing. And, this ties into what a lot of my commentary here in Poway and other parts of California, where regulations make it impossible to build on top of abandoned golf courses, or other regulations make it impossible to transform a single family home lot into a nice, good looking, 4-unit apartment building. There's all these rules that prevent the development of extra housing units. And God forbid you try to build out on the edge into the rural area, and that lights a lot of other people's hair on fire because they think of fire damage, and so is this guy. But I'm thinking, okay, it's important to understand, number one, the problem here lies with government officials that have created these regulations that prevent like large amounts of housing, not just little ADUs in backyards, but I mean developments of hundreds, if not thousands of homes is what we need. But we have politicians that are preventing people from building. They're setting height limits to prevent any sort of high density, high rise. And so it's like squeezing one part of the balloon, and now other parts of the balloon are distorted. And now people suddenly have this amazing financial incentive, a financial opportunity to put an ADU in their backyard, and then they build up. And yeah, from his point of view, it's very frustrating. But I think it's important to understand, as a property owner, you own your property. You don't own the whole neighborhood. You don't own a view. You don't have a right to a view, nor do you have a right to expect that your whole neighborhood around you will not change for 50 years. I think that's important to understand. People, and this kind of gets to the win-win-win-lose matrix that I'm going to talk about later on in this show. People are so focused on making sure their rights are protected and they're pursuing their happiness, they forget the fact that other people have those same rights to pursue happiness and the same rights to live their own flourishing life. So when a homeowner on the other end of your backyard fence starts building in their backyard, yeah, it sucks. It's not your property, so you can't control them. But what you can do is control yourself. So when I saw this video of this guy complaining, I figured, okay, I get the complaint. I've heard the complaint. The news media loves complainers, so they're all over this, and they know it's a hot topic. But I'm thinking, man, if I were in that dude's shoes, I would understand, what can I control? I can control either living here with that ADU in the back of someone else's home that's blocking my view and changing my entire culture in my cul-de-sac, or so he says, or you're going to have to make a decision to move and just leave, right? And just go somewhere else. Now he says, oh, I barely get anything for this house. Dude, you'll be fine. You sell that home, and I know it's not a brand spanking new home, but you're going to get very high six figures for that. And I don't know what part of town it's in, maybe even $1 million, but certainly high six figures. You're going to be fine because the demand for housing is so great that people will buy a house like that as a place to raise a family, even though there's a 2-story apartment building in their backyard, because that was the best option available, because there's so few other good options. So it's just crazy. People don't understand, it seems, the linkage between all these things. They don't understand that all these distortions that we're seeing in the housing market, whether it's high rise, high density that's going in, whether it's the ADUs that are going in, whether it's housing being put like on a thoroughfare like Poway Road, which we are seeing now here in my hometown, whether it's all these regulations about what you can do with Airbnb, and all of these things are the result of the fact, all these problems are the result of the fact there's not enough supply to meet demand. Okay. And it's a basic economic thing. So if you want to see housing prices relaxed, if you want to make it easier for first-time home buyers to buy a home, if you want to make it easier for struggling families to have a more affordable place to live, then the answer is to build more housing. And I know that's counterintuitive to some people. Okay? But here, let me give you an example that puts it into a different context. Let's say that I have an ounce of gold. I don't know, what's the value of gold these days? I don't know. It's like $2,000 an ounce or something. It's been going up. Just for the sake of discussion, it was $2,000. And why is gold expensive? Well, it's because it's scarce, kind of like housing. There's not very much of it, and they're not making a whole lot more. So, there's high demand and a very limited supply. And so it keeps the price of that very high. Now, imagine, if you will, that out of the sky, we had an asteroid flew out of the sky made of solid gold. Oh my God, solid gold. And this asteroid was, let's just pretend, since this is a crazy example, was going to land on Earth and not cause Armageddon. That wouldn't change the world. It would just, there would be suddenly this gigantic mountain of gold, like you'd see, with Bilbo Baggins and, The Hobbit. What would happen to that 1 ounce of gold that you have now? Well, it becomes suddenly less valuable because it's no longer as scarce. Because there's so much more gold available, that means the price of gold is going to go down, down, down. And as a result, we're seeing a similar kind of situation in housing in San Diego. There's not enough housing, and they're preventing or limiting the amount of construction that can be done. And so what it does is it causes prices to go up, and it makes it hell hard for homeowners to buy a house, hell hard for renters. And it provides these perverse incentives for homeowners in single family homes to want to kind of do unusual distortions, like putting an apartment building behind their house with no parking, except for the street parking for them. So you get it? I mean, hopefully you get it, but that's what's going on here in San Diego. Okay. Let's, what we're going to get to next. We're going to talk about Tony Blain next. This, I know, is a big topic here for my friends in Poway. This is a crazy story, but before we do, I just want to tell you, hey, if you want to learn more about what I'm doing here on the John Riley Project, go to my website, johnrileyproject.com. There I got all my old episodes. You can get on our mailing list. You can connect on social media. You can also gain access to all of our previous episodes, video clips, full audio only podcasts are all available and linkable through there. I have a blog and some things that I've written. Maybe you might find that interesting, or maybe you want to be a guest. You see me sometimes here. I got another microphone and it's empty right now. Here it is. I'm leaving it open for Lee Hacksaw Hamilton. It'll be here later this afternoon. But if you want to be a guest on my show, if you want to, talk to me about, local news, maybe you have some reaction to what I've been doing, or if you know someone that you'd like to recommend as a guest, just go to my website, johnrileyproject.com, and go to my contact and leave me a note and I'll get it and we'll chat. Okay, let's keep on trucking. And I'm going to talk now about our good friend, and I put friend in quotation marks. We're going to talk about Tony Blain. Indicted. Will he survive the recall? Okay, Tony Blain. I've talked a lot about him in this podcast, but the thumbnail is that he is a recently elected 1 year in District 2 City Council member in Poway. He had been under fire for unethical behavior. There was a recall campaign that is very active right now to take him out of office. And then I think it was on Friday of last week, Blain was indicted by the San Diego District Attorney for charges that are aligned with what the recall campaign is doing. And we're going to go through that. But this is huge news. I mean, in San Diego County, you've got a sitting elected official that is being indicted by the district attorney. That doesn't happen very often. I mean, that's pretty rare. I'm sure we can go backwards. We can come up with some examples, but I'm thinking of Duke Cunningham. I mean, Bob Filner certainly fit that role. I mean, there's a lot of different guys, or I don't know, were any women involved? Probably not. Probably male politicians. But at any rate, this is a really unusual thing, so Tony Blain has been indicted. And I want to read to you just a few excerpts from this article on kpbs.org. And it says, embattled Poway Council member Tony Blain was charged with 4 felonies and a misdemeanor Friday, less than 2 weeks away from his recall election. The district attorney's office charged Blain with perjury, asking for a bribe, soliciting a bribe, and destruction of public papers, as well as a misdemeanor for stealing a campaign sign. I mean, this is serious. I mean, this is perjury, bribing. This is heavy. The charging document says Blain committed perjury on or about September 24th, 2024, by allegedly swearing in a complaint to the Fair Political Practices Commission that he was a current Poway council member before being elected. So he's lying about who he was. Blain is also accused of 1 count of asking for a bribe and another of soliciting a bribe. In those cases, the district attorney's filing says between December 22nd, 2024 and January 9th, 2025, he allegedly agreed to vote for appointing council member Peter DeHoff as deputy mayor in exchange for DeHoff's vote in favor of a special election to fill the council vacancy in District 1. Article goes on to say, the complaint also alleges that between December 7, 2024 and September 18, 2025, Blain knowingly destroyed communications relating to city business that were subject to disclosure under the California Public Record Act and took acts to evade compliance with the act. Okay, this is a big deal, okay? Because when a district attorney files charges against a sitting politician, and it don't matter if it's just a city councilman from little old Poway here, suburb of San Diego County. If the district attorney is going to file charges, you know damn well they got a good case. You know damn well it's probably true. I mean, don't you? I mean, this is for real. Now, we have been hearing a lot of commentary about these kinds of charges. It was part of the the public record in the city council meetings. I think we saw some evidence of that. We saw there's been a great deal of conversation about some of the things that he's been doing in terms of, the vote trading, quid pro quo. He was, taking public records or not taking public records, but he was preventing his own communication from being part of the public record, essentially blocking transparency. We've been hearing these charges. And, when you hear the charges coming from his political opponents on the city council, you tend to think, are these politically charged charges? Are they just making this stuff up to make him look bad? So their side, because, this is largely driven by Steve Voss and previous city council members, Anita Edmondson, John Mullen, and others that are part of that, old Poway guard, that are behind Voss. I mean, that's who's really behind this whole recall. So, at first you could be a little skeptical and you say, well, there is a political angle to this. Are these politically driven charges? But as more evidence came forward, I started reading. I'm like, oh yeah, this guy looks like he's broken the law. And then sure enough, the DA has now filed indictment. Now he is, this is crazy too to me. He is deployed right now. He's in the Balkans. Is that like Bosnia Herzegovina or something? Is he way out there? But he's in the army. And I know he's a physician and he's been deployed. I think is he in the reserve or is he actually serving in the regular army? I don't know the detail. Which by the way, isn't it odd to you that a politician that was running for office would know full well that he could be deployed to the other side of the earth and expect to be a reasonable representative for his constituents in District 2? I mean, to me, if I knew that I was going to be deployed or could be deployed, I wouldn't have run for city council in the first place. In fact, I might have found that to be a disqualifying criteria if I were a voter. But here we are. Now he's been indicted, but he's way overseas. So I don't know what's the legal procedure to bring him back. You know, I don't know that process. I would imagine that the Army's going to be cooperative with local officials and sort of extradite him back to San Diego. We're going to find out more about that. But it's also put some interesting spin on the recall as well. Okay, number one, the recall has been, in my opinion, from a purely marketing perspective, has been very well done. You know, John Couvrette and his team and the work they've done a great job. Getting the message out, having signatures for petitions, getting street signs, yard signs out there. They've really done a great job promoting this. I've seen digital ads, social media. I mean, it's been the best, most well-run recall campaign I've ever seen in Poway in my history here. And it's working. It appears that he's going to go down. I mean, you rarely hear any positive news from anybody about Tony Blain. It's rare. It does happen, but it's rare. Some of his VFW friends kind of have more of an open mind and are willing to listen to their comrade in arms. But this is serious, man. I think he's a very likely chance that he's going to go down, and this could be prison time. Now, I will say this is that when I first heard of these charges, like when he did the quid pro quo, he said, which one was that? He said to Hoff, if you vote for the special election, then I'll vote for you for deputy mayor. Now, you've got to believe, unless you're really naive, that sort of thing happens all the time in local government or in government of all levels. I mean, people meet behind closed doors and they kind of have agreements, and you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It's just that Blain put that out in the public. But Blain was also harassing the city manager, harassing the city attorney, and other employees. I mean, just being a bull in a china shop. Is all of that impeachable? Probably not. That's just being an a-hole. But destroying public record, yeah, that's a problem. Perjury, lying to people that you are an elected representative when you haven't even been elected nor sworn in. Yeah, that's perjury. That's lying, from a legal point of view. And as well as the quid pro quo, the vote trading, not good, not a good look. So I think it's also important to understand that there's an election going on right now at the same time. So it's important to vote in the recall. You can't just assume, he's likely going to go down. He's likely going to go to prison. But, there's a chance that might not happen. And so if you still don't like the guy, you should still vote yes in the recall. Now, I had always been, from the very beginning of this, I'm always sort of pro recall as a general rule. I just like it as a democratic tool to keep incumbent politicians on their toes, that they know that they can be ousted at any time, not just in the 4-year sequence of their reelection calendar. And with Tony Blain, he's in a different district than me, so I can't even vote for him really, or vote against him. But in the beginning, like I said, some of the charges, did they cross the line legally? I wasn't sure. I'm taking people's word that it was. And I was thinking, and oh, by the way, that kind of funny business, I'm sure happens behind closed doors anyways. But the fact now that the district attorney has filed charges, that means it's likely going to happen. That means it's very likely true. Otherwise, they wouldn't take up such a high-profile case knowing that they would lose. So I think in this case, yeah, I think he's going to go down. I don't think he's going to survive the recall. That's going to open up a whole Pandora's nest of what they're going to do next in Poway. Are they going to have an election, a special election? Supposedly they are. That's part of the deal with this recall. But you never know. There's been a history of appointments when elections could have occurred, but for one excuse or another, they never did. So we'll see how this goes. But this was big news. Yeah. Poway City Council member Tony Blain indicted. Will he survive the recall? I say no. All right, let's keep moving. Having fun here on the John Riley Project, bouncing around, talking stuff. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my ballot. And I haven't voted yet. Have you voted? So I'm going to share with you what I got cooking on my ballot. And there's only one item on my ballot, and that's it. It's Prop 50, which authorizes temporary changes to congressional district maps in response to Texas's partisan redistricting, requires temporary use of new congressional district maps through 2030, directs Independent Citizen Redistricting Commission to resume enacting congressional district maps in 2031, establishes policies supporting nonpartisan redistricting commissions nationwide, fiscal impact, one-time costs to counties up to a few $1 million statewide to update the election materials to reflect the new maps. So this is what we've been talking about all this time with Prop 50. So Prop 50, I said earlier I was a no, and that's not changing. But I think a couple of comments here. Number one is it's good here reading the actual text. And I'm sure this is a summary. I'm sure the whole proposition is probably a legal document. But the fact that this only goes through 2030, I didn't know that originally. I didn't know that it had a sort of a built-in sunset clause, a built-in expiration date, which, by the way, I think a lot of government spending initiatives should have a sunset clause where they have to be re-voted upon. But at any rate, this has a sunset clause built in. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, that sounds really good, because I want fair elections. I don't want elections that favor Republicans. I don't want elections that favor Democrats. I'm an independent voter. I don't have a horse in that race. So I just want it to be fair. I don't want to be locked into a solid blue or a solid red area. I want it to be a competitive race. May the best candidate win. And so I'm a big no on Prop 50. I mean, I still am, but it is, I'm thankful that there's an expiration date. But then I thought to myself, well, wait a minute. This is done in response to what Texas is doing. Texas is going to gerrymander theirs, or maybe they already have done the official deed. And that's going to tilt the playing field for the 2026 election. But do they have an expiration date? Oh, almost certainly no. Of course they won't. So what's going to happen when we get to 2030? Are Californians just going to say, okay, I guess we're just going to go back to the district lines and Texas screwed us? You think they're going to do that? No, I don't think so. I'll bet you what's going to happen is Texas will not change. And we'll try to rally for independent commissions. Maybe the Democrats in California will do that. I'll believe it when I see it. But what's going to happen is in 2030 or 2031, they're going to have to declare an emergency. It's an emergency, because they're still cheating over in Texas. So now we need to keep cheating in California. I'm almost certain that's what's going to happen. So anyways, I am busting out my big Sharpie here, and I am going to put a big circle in the no box. So right there, Prop 50, a big no. And that's my ballot. I can't vote on Tony Blain, as I was saying earlier, the big recall in my hometown of Poway, Tony Blain, District 2. I live literally a block away from District 2. I'm in District 3, so I don't get to vote on it. I probably would vote yes on the recall to have him removed from office. Like I said, I like recalls. I like initiatives that keep politicians on their toes. This dude clearly seems to have broken the law, and if otherwise, the district attorney wouldn't be filing charges. So here we go. All right, let's keep on trucking. And I want to get to my next topic, and this is, okay. Just thinking of something else as I was going through my notes. All right, let's jump here and let's talk a little bit about this. I'm going to call this the win-win matrix discussion, or maybe we can call it this. And this is lessons in pursuing happiness. And this is a topic that I just found fascinating. The more I've dug up on this, the more I've learned. It has really influenced kind of how I see the world. And usually, when you look at the world, you're kind of taught that there's good and there's evil, right? And they want you to choose one. They want you to be the good guy. Who's the good guy? I mean, the good guy is, the person that cares about other people, that puts other people above themselves. that always thinks of others first. And they're the ones that are going to be out there to help. And those are the good guys. And the evil guys, are the lighting, cheating, SOBs out there that just want to screw you over. Okay. And usually you're presented with those two alternatives. In a lot of ways, that's kind of how people frame the two political parties in America. Republicans, Democrats certainly, frame the Republicans as lying, cheating SOBs, and sometimes you'll hear it from, the MAGA folks kind of, they're down on the Democrats because they're trying to be too nice to the immigrants and all these sorts of things. So you see how this sort of binary look of the world plays well in a political space, but it doesn't really reflect reality, right? Because you might say that nobody's perfect, nobody's perfectly good. There's like a spectrum here. And you need to kind of look more deeply. This is far too simple to analyze. Because when you're looking at the world, what's your worldview and how do you perceive good versus evil? Because there's many things here in the world that some people think are really good and other people of rational minds think is really evil, and vice versa. So I began learning more about this, and this is what I'm going to call the win-win matrix. And you may have seen something like this or some version of this in your history. But, if you imagine an X axis and a Y axis, and one of them is for me, for myself, and the other one is for your partner and the person that you're engaging with, what kind of a relationship are you building with another person? And you can see that there are win-win relationships where both people benefit from the relationship. A good marriage is a good example of a win-win relationship where the husband and wife or the spouse and the spouse, they both bring value to the marriage. They both help support the combined team, and they're both sharing common goals and achieving success. That's win-win. But there's also lose-win, where one side loses, the other side wins. And then there's the flip side of that win-lose, where one guy wins, the other guy loses. And then, of course, there's lose-lose, which no one likes that. No one wants to have a relationship where both parties lose. So if you see this sort of like as a different perspective of simply just good versus evil, let's see if we can place some characters into this matrix that kind of tell the story more effectively. Boom. In the lose-win box, I have Mother Teresa as the classic example of the lose-win mentality. Now, Mother Teresa is a saint in the Catholic Church. She was recently, what's the word for it? There's a term for the process of becoming a saint, but was recently made a saint. I think like in the last, didn't John Paul II do that before he passed? So like maybe within the last 25 years or so. Mother Teresa is the symbol of the person that has gone to the streets of Calcutta in India, where poverty is its most dire, and has sacrificed her life, and her good middle class upbringing, and sacrificing a comfortable lifestyle, and has given up her life to helping the poor in Calcutta. She is bearing the burden. She is carrying the cross, taking the sword. She's losing in her life so others can win. Now, for many people, see Mother Teresa as a heroic figure. The Catholic Church made her a saint. And we could debate that, but it's to her, this isn't a classic lose-win. Mother Teresa loses so the poor can benefit and win. Now, who's an example that's a win-lose? And there's a pretty obvious one. If you pay attention, that's Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the guy that sees the world as win-lose. How many times he says, hey, I'm a winner and you're a loser? We hear that from him all the time. And Donald Trump is screwed over his contractors. When he's been in business, he's gone bankrupt and screwed over his vendors. He's not paid contractors that have done work in his buildings. He wants to rig elections, but only rig them in his favor, not in the other guy's favor. So he thrives on win-lose, because win makes him feel good about himself, and having a loser helps differentiate him from others, makes him feel superior to that person. But from a political point of view, it's a very powerful weapon because it preys on people's perception of who they see as problems, who they see as evil, and let's make those bad guys lose, and then we can win. So we see examples of that. I mean, it's all over the place with Donald Trump. You rarely see him out there trying to get a win-win deal. He's usually going for a win-lose. Okay, then there's, of course, the lose-lose angle to this, which no one wants. The graphic there is a bomb. Looks like it's from the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. There's a bomb that's about to blow up. That's lose-lose, right? Now, in my opinion, tariffs are lose-lose. Tariffs are a loser policy because who wins with tariffs? I mean, someone might win for a short amount of time. Maybe you've seen that video that's circulating about Ronald Reagan talking about tariffs. It's wonderful. But with tariffs, our manufacturers are losing because the cost of steel and aluminum has gone up. And our farmers are losing because they can't export product because the tariffs have started a trade war and the other countries are putting tariffs on their own people. The whole thing is a mess. No one's winning. And economic output declines for both sides of the trade. It discourages trade, but trade is win-win. Trade makes people prosper. This takes away from trade, and it makes trade, in this case, by seizing trade, by disincentivizing trade, it makes it lose-lose. And then finally, what is the win-win? And right up there at the top, I have two people shaking hands, two people coming to an agreement that I'm going to help you and you're going to help me. And isn't that the basis of most relationships? Whether it's a personal relationship or a business relationship or it's a family relationship, it's the best ones are win-win. Those are the quality relationships to pursue. But, it gets confusing here because sometimes people think that win-lose is a win or lose-win is a win. And other people sometimes think win-lose is a loss or lose-win is a loss. And they get confused on some of these things. So I'm not going to go way into detail on this, but I wanted to first sort of put this paradigm on the table because I'm going to be using it a lot more in my future podcasts to kind of sort of position ideas and concepts on where they lie in this matrix. And some of these policies that some people perceive as a winning policy, they lose sight of how other people are losing. Or are they really losing, or instead, are they just not winning as much? And you can see how there are degrees to this. And we're going to get into that. But the win-win matrix, lessons in pursuing happiness, and I'll have more of that in a future episode. Okay, so how was that? Did we do okay? I mean, we talked about embattled San Diego homeowners fighting ADUs. We talked about the win-win matrix, kind of a sort of a lens and morality of looking at the outside world, of pursuing happiness. Talked about Argentina, maybe dispelled some myths, maybe put some more facts on the table. There's a lot to that story, both good and bad, but often the good part is overlooked, and I think I shared a good part of that. We also talked about my ballot and what I did. I voted, of course, no on Prop 50 in California. And then we talked at length about our city councilman here in the city of Poway, Tony Blain, indicted by the district attorney. That's trouble. Tony Blain is deployed, he's a Army physician. So he's going to be coming back to America, and we're going to follow this trial and see what happens with this. But it's not looking good for Tony Blain. And he has a recall that he's under fire right now. People are voting on his recall. Proponents of the recall are saying, don't stop, still vote yes on the recall. Okay. Hey, this is John Riley. This is episode number 346 of the John Riley Project. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Hope to be back real soon. And y'all have a good day. For life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, this is John Riley.